Welcome to another episode of What's the Hype podcast.
The building. And an interception, and you're not down by 10 anymore. Andre Howe, his second interception.
To get you the information that you need to start your own business and do your own thing.
And I felt like it gave me a good perspective.
I was not the first person to go through what I went through.
Welcome to another episode of What's the Hype podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Pope, a.k.a. the Pod Disciple.
I'm Andre Howe.
Welcome to another episode. We just excited, man. We got another special guest, a Nashville native, Vanderbilt University alumni. So Dre, really know him very well, former teammate, good friend, founder and president of Rose Creek Wealth Management, and author of PTSD, and we'll talk about that. But with no further ado, we want to welcome to the podcast, Reggie Ford. Welcome to the podcast.
What's up, Jeff? Dre, appreciate y'all for having me.
For sure.
Absolutely, man. We're excited. I don't know how much you are familiar with our platform, but what we like to do, man, we just like to bring guys on that are familiar with the sports space, that have kind of, either work in it or have been a part of it, and just kind of understand the concept a lot of times of what athletes and those in the industry face or have experienced, and just kind of tell that story. So with that being said, we just like to really start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, obviously Nashville. Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up there.
Yeah, so like you said, Nashville native, been here my entire life. But growing up, it was cool. It was rough, I guess. My mom, single mom, she was a teenager when she had me. My dad was barely in my life growing up, was in and out of prison. But I had a lot of support, a lot of family around. Most of my family, like extended family and all, is in Nashville. So that was nice to have. And but I was the kid that was always just good at school, good in the books. And so I used education, man, and it helped me get opportunities that I never thought imaginable. So I grew up in the public school, going through school, and then I got an opportunity to go to a private school, Montgomery Bell Academy here in Nashville, and really just changed the course of my life. And that led to Vandy and then everything else that I've been doing. But it's just a blessing to be able to tell my story and coming from where I came from.
So when did you first start playing sports? Which sport was it? And who inspired you the most?
Yeah. First started like organized sports, probably 10. I was 10 years old, and I was playing football for an nonprofit organization called Backfield in Motion. And prior to that, like I was always playing football and basketball and everything else around the neighborhood, but we couldn't afford league fees, and we didn't have a car, so I couldn't get to and from games and practices and things like that. But Backfield in Motion is nonprofit, solved all those issues. Like I walked to the center and play for the center, and then they would provide transportation, they would provide food, they would give tutoring and everything else. So it was a blessing to have that program around, and that introduced me to Vandy. I played in my first year. I played in the All-Star game, and it was at Vandy Stadium, and my eyes were open then. And I was like, this is where I want to play when I make it to college. I played football. Then, I was playing basketball, but organized didn't start until I was like in 6th grade, I think. And played that through high school, played football through college, and then ran track. So track was probably my favorite and the best sport that I was playing. And those kind of sports I played. I think you said inspiration. From a professional level, I always looked up to Barry Sanders growing up. So, my first number was 20. I was, running around trying to be Barry. But, I can name a ton of people. I'm gonna leave it at Barry.
Man, it's amazing how exposure, leads to expansion. Meaning just being able to see something, right, and being able to process and say, now this is something I can aspire to. So when you talk about just having the opportunity to play in Vandy Stadium and how that left an imprint on you, that began the process of ultimately leading you there. And that's just so powerful, right? Like understanding how, thoughts, leads to, can, lead to a dream that can be fulfilled. So I just want to make sure that, that's something that people caught on and can grasp. So,
Oh yeah.
But that's amazing. Now you talk about, let's get to your high school. You talk about going to a private school, a school that was pretty, dominant in sports, or kind of have a history of sports. Can you talk about, that school, and then, your success individually and as a team while you were there?
Yeah. So, yeah, the school was just a football powerhouse in Tennessee for years and years, and it's probably one of the oldest. It's older than Vanderbilt, the school is. So it's got history for days. And the transition from public school, coming from where there's probably like 4 or 5 white kids in my class, to being the only black kid in my class when I got to NBA, it was tough socially, but academically adapted well to it, and athletically did the same. And it was fun to be a part of a winning program. The school I went to right before that, we went 0-7 in football, and it was ugly. It was sad. But got the NBA, and it was like, losing was an anomaly. You didn't get used to losing ever. And we ended up going on a tear. Like my junior year, we were the best team in the state. Went 13-0. We ranked highest, I don't know, like 15 in the nation at one point. And, it was a crazy career, a crazy season for us. Senior year, we came back with a pretty good season. We lost 2 games, but we still pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then for me personally, like I a team leader, of course, on all the teams that I played on, and a leader in the classroom as well, which I think surprised a lot of people. You got to take like an entrance exam and things like that, and I don't know if I scored what they thought I was going to score or whatever, but like it didn't look like I was going to do well at the school, and I ended up just doing me and doing well, but it set me up for sure for college, like one of the most academically challenging schools in the state, probably in the Southeast. And, I mean, so many good things to say about it. My time there was like this love, hate, good, bad relationship with it. But I think we all can say that about our high school. So.
Definitely. We're going to talk about your recruiting process and where you decided to go to college.
Yeah. So when I listen to y'all pod, and I'm like, man, all these dudes like knew what to do, and it's crazy because we had plenty of greats that made it to college and played in the NFL and things like that, but recruiting was never a priority at NBA at the time that I was there. So we had, like I said, we went 13. We had some guys on the team that just weren't getting looks because I didn't go to a single camp. I didn't talk to a single college coach. I just didn't know. And my coach, he was real young. He's like 26 at the time. And like, I don't think he knew. And so all of the recruiting was done by the Ivy Leagues for me. So I had, offers from Harvard and cool schools, like great schools. I'm like, I want the D1. I want the SEC offer, and that just wasn't in the cards for me. So I had some small mid majors, and then Ivy Leagues, and for me, I wanted to stay in Nashville. I had younger siblings. All my family was here, and going away to the Ivies just didn't feel right for me. I felt like I would have been put in a situation similar to the transition from public school to NBA, where it would have been too much socially to overcome. So I decided I was going to apply to Vandy, and I got in, and I initially didn't even think I was going to play, just because nagging injuries from high school and things like that. I was like, man, let me just focus on school, have fun, and but ended up walking on, and so yeah, one of the best decisions I ever made.
It's interesting. Our life kind of parallels in a very similar way. As a senior, wasn't really sure about the process, even though my high school, which is a prominent sports high school down in Miami, I'm originally from Miami. I had a lot of guys signing and going to school before me, but just it wasn't really a focus of like everybody need to make sure you're taking these tests, you're making sure that you qualify, making sure that you understand the process. So for me, I kind of wasn't sure exactly, what it is that I had to make sure to put myself in the best position possible. So much like yourself, I had to walk on at college and end up being able to have success in that way. Can you talk about ultimately when you decided to make the decision to walk on, and what that overall experience was for you?
Yeah. So it was the first game of the season. So the freshmen at Vandy, they do this like run, they call it Gold Rush or something like that. We all wear gold shirts. And all of them just run on the field. And it was my first time on a football field where I wasn't playing and, since I was 10 years old. And it just didn't feel right. It didn't sit right with me. Being in the stands didn't sit right. And so that was kind of the spark. It was like, all right, the passion is still there. I need to get back out here. And so interesting enough, like my high school coach, his great grandfather was an all-time great at Vandy, and our whole facility, our football facility, is named after him. And so I called him. I was like, "Yo, coach, I'm thinking about walking on. You think you can, make a call?" And he made a call. Literally got brought into the office. Well, I met with a coach at Vandy first and told him I wanted to walk on. Then I called my high school coach, and then the next day he was like, "You on the team?" So
wow.
Yeah, it was one of those things like, your network is everything. And so I had I had proven myself to my high school coach enough for him to just put his, vouch for me like that, just without, seeing me for, however many months it had been. And then, the coaches respected my coach enough to accept me on the team. So I didn't try out or anything like that. It was just, let's go. And I don't think that's the case for most walk-ons, but it was cool.
Absolutely not the case. And I like that. I like that idea, because what I want to speak to in that regard is maintaining good relationships, right? Like, every relationship matter, whether it be your position coach in high school, the coordinator, the head coach. Just really maintaining those relationships can go a long way, because even if you're fortunate enough to be able to be considered at the pro level, the scouts and they all circle back and have conversations. So I always tell young guys, like, it is important to maintain relationships, and even if it didn't work out in your favor in that way, don't burn those bridges.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, one of my best friends, he's a scout, and he'll tell me, he's got the high school head coach and position coach who moved on. They in corporate America somewhere, but they calling them just to check on character and check on how they work ethic is and things like that. So I couldn't stress that enough either. Yeah, definitely never burn a bridge. And, people move in their different directions. You may lose touch with people, but never burn a bridge.
Absolutely.
That's what's up, Reggie. I didn't know that, Reggie.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's
crazy. Yeah.
But you had the honor of being a part of the Vandy football team. And can you talk about your major and what your career was after football?
Yeah. So I came to school thinking I was going to study psychology. And so psychology has always been a passion of mine, which is, writing a book that is heavily based on mental health and psychology. But I took a psych class, and it was one of the hardest classes I ever taken in my life. And so I just stuck to reading psychology on my own and switched to econ. So I was a economics major and a corporate strategy, basically our business minor. So I was strictly business, numbers, finance, things like that. And so that was literally like, I didn't know anything else coming. I didn't know about computer science and things like that. But business was something I always had a passion for, and felt like if I learned enough, I could start my own business one day. I always had this like entrepreneurial spirit. And so yeah, I studied econ, thinking and coming out of Vandy as an econ major, you automatically like thinking investment banking, Wall Street. And that's what that's like 90% of people that come out of there do. I didn't have those connections. I didn't have that internship experience. I didn't have that. So I ended up going back to school and getting my master's in accounting from the business school at Vandy. And that set me up to take and pass the CPA exam. And I worked for a Big Four accounting firm for a couple of years as an external auditor. And I got to see a ton of stuff, working on Fortune 500 companies and things like that. Making sure that their books were stated correctly and that, everything behind creating those numbers were right. And I did that for a couple of years, but it wasn't fulfilling me the way that I wanted it to. And so I started looking for other opportunities. And again, the network, a person that I knew from high school, his dad had started a bank and wealth management company. And he heard I was looking. We had a couple meetings, and before I knew it, I was starting in wealth management. And it was probably one of the best decisions that I made, because even going through econ and business minor and everything, and learning about personal finance and learning about investments, that's something that just doesn't get taught. And like, that's coming from an econ major, accounting master, like it just doesn't get taught. And it took me being in the working world, doing it for other people, to understand the whole, complexities of it all. And so I worked there for a couple of years and decided, I really had this passion to help, people that came up like I came up, that maybe the first in their family to really have the opportunity to create generational wealth. And that's why I started Rose Creek Wealth Management.
Man, I think, again, if we're paying attention to just the things that you're saying, again, it goes back to relationships. You got a friend whose dad started a business that opened the door for you to kind of learn more, and understanding, again, not burning bridges, understanding how to build and cultivate relationships is so special. You can have someone who have all the tools and the skills to be successful in whatever space they are in, but if any type of social interaction that is valuable in the industry, if you lack that, you're gonna lack, right? Because you got guys that may not have all the technical skills, but have the social skills and are really successful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I just wanted to, again, highlight that reference of knowing somebody that, again, starting a bank. And I don't have to guess what background they may be from. You talk about starting a bank and wealth management. Come on, man. That's a whole different ballpark.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's big time. And wow. It's successful too. It's like, it's been around for now about 15, 20 years. So it's been successful, and it's amazing to see what started as an idea and what it turned into. But even going back a little bit further, back to like the relationship part of it, once I finished my my master's degree, the big four accounting firms, like when you meet and interview, it was a very relaxed interview for our group, just because they knew the quality of student they were going to get coming out of Vandy's Masters of Accountancy program. What it came down to, and knowing this on the other side too, is when I was an actual employee there, we're looking for people we can get along with, people that we like, people that personalities vibe with ours. And because all the technical stuff, you either expected to know it or it's going to get taught to you. Mm-hmm. And so, from there, it's like, man, can I sit down in a room with this person for 12 hours? Because sometimes it's some long days. And the answer is yeah, then yeah, more times than not, you're going to get an invite.
Wow. No, that's good to know. That's definitely good for someone to kind of consider that and start think about that early on. So as you mentioned, as a founder and president of Rose Creek Wealth Management, can you talk about why you decided to start your own company, and who are the people that you really wanted to serve?
Yeah. So when I talk about the name Rose Creek, it comes from the poem by Tupac, Rose that grew from a crack in the concrete. Mm-hmm. And, that metaphor and that imagery is just, you see a rose coming out of a crack in the concrete. Through all the perceived impossibilities, its tenacity helped it grow and reach the sun. And I viewed my life as that story, through all the craziness that goes on in life and so many other people's lives, that to have the ability to succeed and thrive. That was just something I wanted to celebrate, and not only in my story, but in the stories of my clients as well. And so while I was at the wealth management company, I had written a article on why athletes go broke. Mm-hmm. And I was doing all this research and it just reading article after article, headline after headline. It was just breaking my heart every time, because it'd be people that, I looked up to playing Madden, or people that I'd known, either played against or played with. And it was just heartbreaking. And one, you know, there were many different things, but a theme throughout that I noticed was just like the lack of education. You know, going back to what I was saying, like I had a whole master's in accounting and still didn't know this stuff until I got into the work that I was doing. And so I wanted to create the company and emphasize education, emphasize financial literacy, building the building blocks, starting at, you know, because, you know, the stuff that we learned in math, right? We started at 1 + 1. We started learning numbers. Then we go 1 + 1, 1 - 1. But that's where we got to start with financial literacy and building and investing and things like that to get to the places of the huge complex stuff that goes on. And too often we skip all that and we just go straight to the most crazy, flashy investment or thing that you can do. And so it was important for me to really treat it as a educational piece and grow, you know, the literacy, financial literacy for all my clients. And so I worked with professional athletes and young, thriving professionals, affluent professionals who are, you know, the roses that grow out of concrete. You know, the first generation college grads, and, you know, lawyers and doctors and people who are really, you know, influencers in the community. So it's been good because it's exciting. I get inspired by my clients every single day because of the work that they're doing, the stuff that they're doing. But at the same time, we're growing together, and I'm helping them understand the power that they have to, you know, potentially create and maintain and pass down generational wealth.
Absolutely. That's amazing, man. Definitely respect for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So it's being one of your, I'm one of your clients. So as your clients, you'll help me with my finances. But can you talk about the challenges you see with athletes that are from underserved communities that have worked so hard on the craft, but is not educated on themselves around finances? And what do you think? And what do you think can be done to help change this narrative?
Yeah. So I wanna get some legal. This is not considered financial advice. No solicitation of securities or anything like that. This is just my opinion. Not LPL, not Rose Creek Wealth Management, not Ella Wintham's. But I would say, you know, some of the challenges is you get you get a lot of, you got an entourage, right? You got an entourage with you when you become this figure, this professional athlete. Everybody can Google you and see the details of your contract and things like that. So that brings a lot of attention that you know, isn't always the best. And what that does is it just creates this expectation from the community around you that you have to act or be a certain way. And what I see is that that's detrimental to, you know, the spending habits or the gifting habits of said individual. And, you know, it's a lot of times, you know, when you come from, you know, growing up in underserved communities and you got so many people feeding you to get you to the point to where you made it to the NFL, you feel like obligated, rightfully so, to give back to that community. But there are tactful ways to do that to where it's not detrimental. And so I think that's where the education comes in, and understanding, you know, like looking at this large lump sum of money and just doing some simple division, right? You can divide your salary once you take out taxes, agent fees, dues, everything else. All right, now let's divide that by how many people you think this is going to feed. Then divide that by how many years you think this is going to last. And when you start to do that, you know, you realize that, okay, the piece that's coming to you is only $20,000 a year. You can't live off that, right? And so like getting the education piece and then understanding, you know, the power that you have if you make some adjustments to either your spending or your gifting or just, you know, investing habits can make a huge impact.
I've had this conversation with many of our guests, especially those that are in the financial space, about making it an emphasis for younger guys just to be exposed to finances, whether it be high school, extracurricular activities. I think that, you know, I don't know how to tackle this from broad standpoint, national standpoint, where you can, almost require it. If you can mandate this as a part of any high school program, I guarantee you it would change the landscape when you just talk about the basis of understanding finances, especially if you have the opportunity in whatever said sport that you are participating in. So look at contracts early on, right? If I can start understanding more in depth contracts if I'm a high school player, look at how it breaks down: signing bonus, guaranteed, all these little nuances that go into contracts. Now, as I start to move along, now I'm at the college level, right? I can get a little more detail because I may have teammates that go, right, and be able to come back and tell me, hey, this is really how it works. You only get paid for 17 weeks. You're not getting paid in the off season if you don't have no, workout bonus in your contract. Like those things that you can be able to, again, really expose guys to that. Now, when their opportunity comes, I think they're further along.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the earlier you start, the better. And honestly, so growing up in the hood, the talks about money were different than the talks that I witnessed when I went to NBA. Mm-hmm. And they had been having conversations, even if it's just hearing it at the dinner table. Dad talking to mom about the mortgage and this and that and that. Like you're hearing those conversations, and it's starting to create this interest in you. And so I see even in wealthier communities where the conversation is had even earlier, 3-4 years old, when you start getting an allowance or birthday money, like you're having to make these real life decisions about, okay, do I do this, do that? Do I invest and save? And so like, the word invest didn't mean anything to me until I got to college, honestly. And but to understand what that means early on, so that, because everything is about habits, right? You build these good habits over your lifetime. Then you start to make better decisions when it comes that time and you get that big check.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's key. And I think that's really dropping some information, even on those that are watching that may be parents, like early on. Let's start that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Let's set up some custodial accounts, and you're just, automatically having money going to that. I remember watching, just kind of dealing with my financial advisor, and I understand finances a little bit, but just a documentary showed if you start with $1,000 for your son before the age of 1, by the time he's at retirement age, if say if it's not used for college or whatever, you're talking about over $1 million, compounding interest, right? Like just those type of things. Like you can, even if that's the sacrifice to start the generational wealth, or even to be the first millionaire, like if you can put $1,000 away and allow it to sit in an account that's invested in the market, what that can do. So just imagine if you, even if you're doing $50 a month, after you put 1,000, you do 50, like that changes the whole landscape.
Yeah.
Instead of buying shoes, instead of buying like all those things that we think of, especially from our community, Louis J's and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
You put that money in those accounts, man, that's game changing. Even by the time if he's 18 and looking for an opportunity to go to college, like that's game changing.
Absolutely. And compound interest, you said it, but it's the eighth wonder of the world. Like it literally, you can benefit from it or you can suffer from it, right? And the benefit is the investment. What you just said, you put that 1,000 in, you watch it grow over the course of time. That's the benefit. But the opposite side is what so many people fall victim to, is the interest rate that's tied to debt. That's compounded too. And so that's the negative versus the positive. And if we can get more people on the positive side, understanding, just the reoccurring, the regular, the automatic money that you put away, whether it's $1 or $1 million a month, it has a huge impact, and it's much greater than the amount of money that you put in, because of time value of money, and that future dollar is going to be worth a lot more. So starting early, start often, and make it regular.
Absolutely. We can speak about we can speak about lack of resources and finances in our community for days. But another huge topic that you also know well is the mental health, right? So as we segue and talk about your book, PTSD, Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction, talk about how this whole idea came about and your personal experience when you talk about just mental health.
Yeah, so I live with PTSD and depression and anxiety and all types of stuff. I think many of us do. And but the book, it came about when I was dealing with some of the toughest stuff that I've ever had to deal with in my life. My grandmother, she was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and right around Christmas, she had a tumor removed from her brain. And January 1st of that following year, I woke up to a call from my dad, and she had attempted suicide by overdosing on insulin. And so that was my, Happy New Year, good morning call. And a couple of days later, just like more stuff, more dramas just started to trickle out. And I didn't have all my coping mechanisms were just gone, right? Like I was used to compartmentalizing, I was used to internalizing a lot of stuff, and I just couldn't no more. So I turned to just writing, and I would get my phone at the end of every night and just write and just write and write and write. And it was just feelings. Some of it was, one word, it was just whatever I felt. And I did that for the course of the rest of her life. When she passed away, I took those journal entries in my phone and put it on my computer, and it was 60 pages. And that was a 6-month span. And so much happened that I was like, okay, how do I deal with all this? And so I just kept writing. And I took that as that was like the climax of it all. But then I built up to how did we get to this place? And, what really was a tipping point was I found myself, I had an anxiety attack. And it was like the first time like I really, really felt anxiety. And I was on the ground crying in a fetal position, and I don't even know what I was saying. And outside looking in, you probably wouldn't even notice. Like I probably had conversations with Dre. I was walking around, I was a zombie really though. And so the next day I was like, man, I need to go to therapy. I need to go to a doctor and figure this out, because I was like having this out of body experience, looking at myself like that's not me. And so I just, had to, focus on my mental health so that I could be productive, so that I could live, so that I could sleep, so I could, be me again. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And yeah, it's amazing where it's gone so far.
There's a major shift right now around mental health awareness, especially for athletes. How important is that sports? How important is that sports program, even at the high school level, start to incorporate wellness?
Man, extremely important. And I think going back to kind of the same topic about finances, the earlier the better, because as soon as we start thinking, we can start having mental health issues, right? And that's immediately. And so the space in between our ears is so important for everything that we do in life. And you notice behavior issues early on in a child's life. Sometimes behavior is just the presentation of mental health that can't be expressed verbally. So they're going to act out. And so, I've done a lot of research and adverse childhood experiences. They call them ACEs. That's a study that looks at 10 different categories of things, from trauma, neglect, abuse, and including sexual traumas. And you rank it, and you'll be surprised that at the age of 5, 10, 15, what some kids score on those things. And I happen to have 10 out of 10 on it. And so that and those scores, they've done studies and research on the health outcomes later on in life based off what your score is. And so like we talking early on, like if we can prevent those things, if we can start talking about ways to self-regulate, so that you aren't 18 or 30 or 50 not knowing skills to help yourself regulate. It should start as early as we can.
Man, when you talk about, I'm just kind of being more aware of just mental health in terms of just the impact from an early age, as you mentioned, because just based off of just the information that I know, within those first 5 to 10 years, that shapes everything of a kid's life in terms of just how they see the world. So those experiences, whether it be traumatic, growing up in environments that are not healthy, they really start to see life that way and think that is the healthy, whether it be domestic violence, crime, drug, all that type of stuff. You think that's just the way of life it is for everybody. And being able to, be aware of it, early on and start the healing process, or in any other case to try to prevent those things, is very vital. And just reading your book and just some of the things that just kind of early on in the pages when you talk about, and this is interesting, right? Because this was normal to me. I grew up in a city, Miami, seeing everything from a very young age. I lost my dad. My dad died before I was even born, right, through violence. And my mom was a teenage mom, just like you. But this story that you mentioned in the book about peeing in the pill bottle, like I literally thought that was just what you did. You had cousins and uncles and stuff that might have been in the system, and and literally that's what I did. You know what I mean? And I just, now as an adult, I have my own son who's 3, and just being able to just kind of go back on some of these things. I'm like, man, these experiences, these things that we're exposed to, that I was exposed to, that you were exposed to, some of these individuals that's just from environments like that, man, like it's PTSD from the beginning.
Absolutely. That's why I say I think many of us are walking around with PTSD and not knowing it. It's often, misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed as something that, depression but PTSD is prevalent. Yeah. And the pill bottles. I mean, like I was like toward the end of my grandfather's life. I'd go over there and he got the stove like cracked open on preheat, warming the spot up. That was normal at one point. It's just carbon monoxide, just breathing it all in. It's like, dang, like that's crazy. Like, but so many things like that we normalize. That, like you said, you got to become aware that those things aren't actually normal, and that's kind of the progression of the book. And I don't know how far you've gotten, but the first third is normalization, and then realization. The awakening, like, oh, this wasn't normal, and then finally liberation, where you're able to find peace in all of it.
Amazing book, and I definitely recommend. As I work my way through it, man, that individuals go out and get a copy, man. I mean, you're really talking about some stuff that are. As more people read it, they'll realize that there's a lot of things in their life that relates to it, that they can relate to. They can find something that they've probably experienced in their lifetime. So can you talk about some of the things maybe that you're doing in the community or could be done around just mental health awareness and even financial education? We talked about it briefly, just kind of the exposure early on, but I don't know if there's anything you're doing now trying to help in the community with this type of stuff.
Yeah, so honestly, just like this past weekend, I had a wellness event. It was a book signing, but we included a theme of wellness, and so brought out multiple vendors from nutritional wellness to spiritual wellness to financial, occupational, all the different forms of wellness in a person's life. Try to expose them to that, understand that all these things are working in balance with one another. You at least want to get them in balance with one another, because it's one thing to have all the money in the world but your mental health is gone, or to be as spiritual as can be but your physical is gone. Like, so you want to be able to live in that balance. And so just like trying to make my platform a place where people can come to at least get knowledge about those things, whether it's my social media or events such as that one. I'm on the board of a couple of nonprofits, some that focus primarily on mental health or some form of health and wellness, just to and with the mission, overarching mission of getting that out to the public, getting that out to communities that don't necessarily get it all the time. And so serving on those boards from a high level, being able to, make strategic decisions and bring in partners that will help get that word out, bring money in to get it to communities, get it to the people that need it. And then I've been, kind of on the speaking circuit recently and just going around telling my story, being vulnerable, allowing other people to be vulnerable. And, that's been one of the best platforms for me to be able to tell the story and get it out there to get people to understand how important it is to take care of your mental health and your wellness.
Absolutely. Commend you on that.
Yeah. So Reggie, where can people find you and purchase your book?
Yeah. So social media, Reggie D. Ford, pretty much everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And then you can buy my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, wherever you get your books. I prefer you get them from a local bookstore, support our local bookstores. So if you call your local bookstore or go online, try to order it that way. Perseverance through severe dysfunction, they'll order it for you, ship it to you, whatever it may be.
Well, listen, this has been truly an episode of enlightenment, of education, just so many different dynamics that plays into this episode. And I think that these are the type of episodes that ultimately, we like to kind of touch on, and we like to, bring forth, because we can talk about sports and being drafted and money, but when you talk about for the betterment of the community, everybody won't have the opportunity to make it pro, right? But for the betterment of an individual, being more aware of these things, when we talk about mental health and finances, I think that we can start to overall build a better community, better environment, just better individuals in our that comes from where we're coming from, or just trying to impact those type of communities. So, man, Reggie, I appreciate you taking some time, jumping on, talking about your life experience and the things that you have gone through and the things that you just aspire to. I appreciate it. Dre, is there anything else you have for Reggie?
Reggie, that's my boy, man. Like we came up together in college. Like I really got to know him in college, but he really put me on. I made it to the NFL. I was making money. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have no clue to do with it, bro. Like no clue what I would do with my money. I'll just put it in the bank, put it in the bank. Get some to my mom here, get some to my sister here, get some to my other sister here, get some to my daddy, and that's all I knew. Just give away money. And then Reggie came into my life and taught me how to invest. And that really changed my life and really put me on the right path with money. Because like I said, I didn't know what to do. I never heard about investments. I never grew up like that. So I started put your money in the bank. Put your money in the bank. That's all I ever thought. So he really put me on like kind of investing, like really building my wealth, and kind of getting and kind of being like a mature adult. You know what I mean? Like I was still a kid making all that money and just giving it away basically. So he really put me on and really guided me through that life lesson of like saving money and doing the right thing by money. So I really appreciate you, Ray, for that.
Appreciate you, my brother.
Man, awesome, man. And that's just a story in itself, man. And just, more guys are like that or have those experiences probably than not, in terms of just not being really sure about what it is they want to do with their money, what they should do. And that's how sometimes guys find themselves in not so great situations in terms of losing their money and things like that. But ultimately, man, again, we appreciate you jumping on the podcast. Again, for all those that are listening and watching, please go find Reggie D. Ford on almost all social media so that you can check out his platform, go find it and buy his book and support this brother. So with that being said, we thank you for being on the podcast. Until next time, enjoy.
Appreciate y'all.